So welcome back to Unfazed Under Fire. I'm David Craig Utz, the Resilient Leadership Guy, your host and moderator for the show. This show aims to support executives to improve their leadership impact and gain insights how to be more resilient in these uncertain and disruptive times we find ourselves in. And today I'm very excited to continue my Navigating the Top series. And during these episodes, we hear from seasoned trailblazing executive leaders about what they have learned in their career journey and to understand their leadership philosophy and the principles they led by, and also to learn what they're doing to bolster their resilience in these crazy times. And I'm doing this series because I know that executive clients highly value learning from other seasoned executives and their approach to dealing with very similar challenges. Now, in today's episode, we have a real treat. I'm honored to be joined by Keith Zimmerman. And Keith started his career as an engineer in the oil and gas industry and went on to obtain a degree in economic systems. His career led him to very senior roles, including being a senior executive for BP Amoco. His time at Amoco included responsibility for economic evaluation of its international exploration and development projects. And all of this led to a very interesting stint as Russia resident manager, in which he assisted Amoco in partnering with Russia oil and gas companies. Now, this experience helped Keith become masterful in cross-cultural development and dispute resolution, as you can only imagine. He left that role to become VP of Business Development at Schlumberger, IPM, and City Oriente Limited. Both organizations were internationally focused oil and gas companies. Now, in 2009, the tables turned upside down a bit for Keith in his life as he suffered a severe concussion during a skiing accident that changed the trajectory of his life and led him to study advanced meditation practices that shifted his entire focus for his career. In fact, in 2017, Keith joined the board of Mustang Bond Foundation, whose mission includes sharing advanced meditation practices globally. Keith was drawn to supporting this organization because of his own experience that he had with meditation and also his desire to help others understand how to deal with traumatic brain injuries more effectively. Now, Keith is also launching a new project called Collaborative Evolution, which explores the complex relationship between species, cosmic phenomena, and the role of non-local and non-dual consciousness in shaping humanity's future. It recognizes that many people do feel a deeper purpose that guides them through challenges and opposition. And while some can articulate these experiences, the project seeks to broaden the perspective on our collective situation and develop innovative solutions for this uncertain future we seem to be facing right now. Now, in your personal life, I know you're an avid sailor. You live in New Hampshire with your partner, Jen Bloom, who is retired in a career as a Harvard-trained psychologist. So I imagine the two of you have some very rich conversations. So thanks again. It's a real privilege to have you on the show today, Keith.
And David, it's my pleasure to be with you. And I think this is a point in our human evolution that calls for increasing the capacity of leaders across the board. So I'm really happy to see you out there and making this available to people who have such interest.
Well, I appreciate you being here again. We're going to go dive into all that. I thought we'd start a little bit with talking about your career journey into leadership. And, you moved into very senior positions, especially at BP Amoco. And maybe you could touch on a few key moments during that early part of your career that shaped how you viewed leadership and how you viewed your approach to leadership, if you would.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go into that with you. I come out of a technical background, so I was an engineer, and I was trained to solve problems, and I was trained to do it in a Cartesian kind of context, very materialistic in that fashion. So when I joined corporate arena, I came in as a technologist, and I really had no exposure to the type of thing that you do with regards to organizational design and the psychology of an organization and politics. I was always looking at, definition of the problem, generation of, comparative solutions, evaluation of alternative solutions, trying to make decisions under uncertainty with regards to what's the best means to go forward. But I was really quite ignorant with regards to the dynamics of politics inside a corporation. I was actually quite ignorant of
Yeah.
that. And I joined an oil and gas company, though my degree was in chemical engineering. I looked at the production of oil and gas. And that was because I graduated in 75 from high school and 79 from college. And if you remember, that was, we had the oil crisis of 73 and again 79, where,
Yeah.
the Middle East conflicts ended up having, curtailments of embargoes of oil, and then we had price spikes. And the United States really didn't have much of a view with regards to energy policy other than protecting our resources or presumed resources, which were in the Middle East. So I realized that from a technical perspective, we weren't recovering but a fraction of oil that was in place. And so I addressed all these challenges in that initial stage of my career as, solely technical problems. And I do that inside the structure of a large organization because energy projects require extensive amounts of capital. And whenever you get a large organization, then you start getting, the dynamics that you're aware of, which
Yes.
somebody who just enters the workforce and has a technical background, they really don't understand anything about the politics of how, organizations are structured and how things come together towards, enhancing capacity through teams and through effective leadership. But I slowly, I'm at 66. I've, lived through different periods of
Yeah.
leadership models,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
so I survived the best I could initially, with the limited knowledge of how politics it comes to play. But it was early on. I think I had somebody, a mentor, advise me. Is like, Keith, you know, everybody has an opinion about you. They're either really strong advocates or they're kind of are
The
cautionary.
opposite.
And, well,
Yes.
look at those who are cautionary and see if you see something about them, that would suggest that perhaps uh, their resistance may be that I'm not politically astute.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, you named it. You got to be a little bit more. You need to develop a little bit more political acumen if you're going to drive
That's
something.
right. Yeah. It's a
I
big
don't
one.
know how it's changed. Hopefully that's changed a lot in corporations these days. I worked for a large corporation through until my 40s, late 40s, when I went off to an independent. So I've had the opportunity to work for both very large corporations such as BP, but also very small independent oil and gas company like City Oriente.
Right.
And my view of this is probably I was culturalized to operate in a well-defined uh, structure.
Hmm.
So, and then to adapt to that well-defined structure. And in the oil and gas companies, each company has a slightly different personality, but they're all oil and gas. They're predominantly
Totally. Right.
oriented management and this type of thing. And so, it was, it wasn't, legal. It wasn't creative, creative
Right.
organization. It was more, apply, rigorous engineering mentalities to solve large capital intensive problems. Um, but in doing so, you find obviously that you're working in groups, tasked with specific projects in specific areas, and then the whole dynamic of bringing multiple uh, talents uh, in that activity, and uh, I I worked for 4 years in San Francisco and then Alaska on production in Prudhoe Bay, and at that point I realized that there was there was missing in the equation uh, a more critical thinking with regards to the economics and the uncertainty associated with a number of these projects. And I went back and I got an advanced degree to apply uh, something that went beyond just the problem solving uh, attributes of engineering discipline to something that was a little bit broader. But in that time period, I also took a year off and I backpacked around the world. And
Mm.
that was probably my best education.
Yeah.
And I subsequently utilized that. I did that when I was 29 and 30. I remember turning 30 in Fiji. But when I came back,
Not a bad place to turn 30.
it wasn't a bad place to turn 30. And I'd been traveling for 9 months up to that point in time. And my biggest culture shock was returning to the United States.
Yes.
And I was able to, traveling, that close to the cultures, I was able to realize how uh, uniquely different each culture had in its own internal conditioning. And that
Right.
people's view of the world was really largely a function of how they had been conditioned. And that,
Right.
the majority of us have been conditioned without realizing, to the extent we have been conditioned, and we hold
That's for sure.
it self-evident, but we don't realize that they have been imprinted on us. So
Yeah.
there's the positive attributes of culturalization, but oftentimes there can be limitations associated with that as well.
Yeah.
So I then, with that kind of knowledge and then reentry into a corporate arena, I then began to realize that when I teamed with people inside groups, it was, very powerful to find the differences in the view that we each brought to the problem.
There you go.
So slowly
Yeah.
bit by bit, as I kind of evolved from, just being an individual contributor to then leading teams of MBAs, evaluating opportunities around the world and this type of thing, or being part of a project team which was pursuing one of these larger projects. I began to develop the appreciation for the synergy that comes about in a well aligned team, and that for me meant one that had everyone around the table appreciating the capacities of the other people around that table. And eventually, as I took on leadership positions of pursuing opportunities first in Ecuador and then subsequently in Russia, I really relied on something that discussed but really not modeled or demonstrated very well in the large corporation of shared leadership. And so
Mm.
the focus there being one of trying to acknowledge the capacity of the individuals in a team and leveraging those capacities by sharing responsibility for some of the leadership of the group. And it was something that I could articulate and I could encourage, and in time, uh, those that felt comfortable, would actually stand up and take those responsibilities moving forward. Um, and everybody knows that they've been in organizations, they've been in systems, and they've been in situations in which, you know, it either truly resonates with them or it brings, just, almost nightmarish memories of how people with one leadership, style or another, frustrated the creativity of the group or
Right.
it's much more challenged than that need be as it moved forward. So a large fraction of what I learned, through that time period was the benefit of what I would consider collaboration. So
Yeah.
collaborative efforts in groups, be they small activities or the organization in its entirety. So
Well, yeah. One of the things I want to follow up on right there is it seems like that backpacking trip was a big shift for you, and you were able to kind of generalize that shift back into work and recognize that everybody's walking around with as your conditioning, as you say, which I think is a great, or their programming, whatever you want to say, based on their culture, and that through curiosity and asking questions and getting to know the way they think, you're unlocking more of their potential in their roles. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely the leverage is bringing people, I mean, I got to tell you, if you happen to have a group of you know, 30 to 50-year-old white engineers in an oil and gas company, bringing in diversification with, the female MBA from Harvard and it's a challenge for that individual walking into that group, right? And then the challenge to the people who are in the group that are looking at trying to maximize the benefit of first perspective, comes to make it like, how can we all not just get along, but how can we all leverage,
And appreciate each other.
perspective,
Yeah.
come to the table. And then, of course, because I was working on international oriented growth projects, we had, expatriates from around the world, both, with experience from having worked and lived in foreign cultures, and then those nationals from the other, locations coming to work, in the home office. We had quite a diverse community that we could subsequently, identify and incrementally, leverage over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems like, there's people they walk in a room with, let's say, the female MBA in an oil and gas company, and that's not, you may not have worked with somebody like that before. Or you look at when you did the Russian resident manager, boy, that's on steroids, right? You're meeting a whole different culture, conditioned in a completely different way. And it's when we face our conditioning, it's almost like we hit a wall because we're looking over there at somebody else that does not compute. And we go into, and would you say it's fair, you kind of jump in your survival mechanism, and that tends to put up a wall even further. And your job as a leader was somehow to break down those walls and get people to listen to people and appreciate, hey, they may have a different perspective, a different set of programming, but that has potentially insights into what we're doing that could improve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, this idea of breaking down the walls and breaking down the barriers so people can benefit from, sharing, diverse perspective. I remember a female MBA I was describing, and she was extremely bright, and she was wanted to work on Russia, and she had studied Russian history and language, and it was quite a interesting and an exciting opportunity to pursue oil and gas investment opportunities in the early 90s. Russia was just opening, having gone through perestroika, the revolution, and Yeltsin was in charge, and things were transitioning. So she was very excited to be working with Amoco on its activities in the former Soviet Union, but she was embedded with predominantly some domestic oriented engineers that were looking at these larger projects, and it was very much an engineering mentality. She was supposed to support and provide perspective for the non-technical risk, which dwarfed the technical risks.
Right.
We needed her to be able to provide perspective for these teams to think through things that they weren't even considering.
Right.
And I had to, and she found it, she came at it in one direction and those teams came at it in another direction. And I was supposed to leverage the MBAs supporting the teams, evaluating all these various opportunities. And I had to let her know, it's like, look, this is not, Goldman Sachs. We are not operating at that level, but for you to be effective, you're going to have to win the trust and the respect
of other
engineers.
People.
And initially they were a bit put off by the view of, here's this, know-it-all female, Russian MBA that's telling us, all these, non-technical risk, and what does she really know? It takes any team.
Takes time.
It takes time to build that recognition, and I made sure that periodically we'd have reviews, and then I could reinforce with senior management that, the non-technical risks that we were facing were dwarfing technical risks. And so that, slowly but surely, her advice became more and more important for the teams to create, rational proposals so that they could move forward with well thought solutions.
That's a great story. As you look back at that one, you could generalize it to all situations when you're trying to build collaboration and mutual understanding and get, in a sense, initially build some respect and trust and rapport, right? So that as you build trust and respect and rapport, as human beings, we tend to then begin to open up to the other person. Is that fair to say? And so, what is it that she did, or what did you encourage her to do that helped her start to develop that rapport with these engineering focused individuals that were not quite, that were different than she had, come across before?
Well, I remember I came back from a trip, and all of a sudden I was confronted by one of the groups that she worked with, and like, what is this? What is this? What's happening in with the advice from this individual? And I said, well, what exactly are you talking about? And we looked into it a little bit more, and it was just a simple issue of uh, it was a simple issue where she hadn't adequately educated the individual about the aspects of the risk, but actually just, had gone right to directly
The
to the
headline.
of what's the bottom line on this risk is not going to be acceptable. And I'm like, I had to tell her, it's like, you're going to have to explain it to them, but you just aren't going to be able to have to, explain it once or twice. You're going to have to explain it until they actually can truly understand it. Um,
Right.
and so, you have to have, patience, because they do not come from your orientation and your viewpoint and your background. So,
Right.
um, you know, the I I think the second thing was that as I noticed that in that particular case, and almost in every others, in all honesty, uh, people come forward with their individual perspective and their centristic view that they're coming into this group, but they're carrying they're seeing themselves more as performing this function inside this group. And so they're looking at the group, and they're looking at the activity, and even they're looking at their leadership position as the perspective of the I of the team, you know, and to lose some of that, egoic centricity and more identify with the team,
Yes.
that is where then the respect, and the exchange develops. She actually begins to learn a little bit more about, the engineering aspects of oil and gas, at least to the point where she can actually intelligently discuss some of the technical matters with them, though they're not looking for her for expertise, but for, some kind of, perhaps creative alternative view that they even might not think about. So
Yeah.
we see
Yeah.
that all the time.
Yeah, it seems to me that, first of all, the while there's all your competency and your skills and your intellectual prowess is always important, but primary to that is being affiliated with the team and its focus, and also that you demonstrate some care to be in relationship with others on the team. Like there's a genuine interest in being in relationship, to some degree, and understanding their perspective
Yeah.
as a door opener. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that, and another interesting analog on all of this is that, you learn how to be effective member of a team, and you can eventually, learn how to be an effective leader, right?
Yes, exactly.
Participate in enough different teams, and you have the dynamics of working in, it doesn't matter what the problem is, there's team dynamic issues that are always going to be at play. And you understand how to work through some of those as a contributing member. Then when you have responsibility for leading teams, you have the experience of how teams have either gotten into problems based on interdynamics or how they've gotten through or found solutions based on developing the confidence to leverage one another. And
Yeah.
that that more than anything, I think, was my evolutionary path of my leadership skills. Had
Yeah.
me developing truly a kind of a shared leadership view. Um, my strengths is going into developing countries and putting together an integrated team to work a project. It doesn't really.
Yeah.
Yeah, currently we're building a monastery in Nepal, and we've woven a multinational team there.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Led by the Nepalese in a remote location. It's in Mustang Valley on what is the Annapurna Circuit. People may know of that, but anyway, we're building a fairly significant structure in a remote location in Nepal, and uh, it's a it has different religious perspectives in Nepal. So we have a Hindi project manager, and it's a Bon monastery, and we have a project engineer from Mustang who is a Buddhist. So it's true. It's true. I know we have PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, is providing some auditory oversight and some support with regards to engineering, construction, and
Oh,
management.
very cool.
But we've woven this team together, and right now I have what I consider to be
Um,
a world class. I mean, we're under budget, we're on time, we're moving forward, and I think we'll have a very successful result. And it did. There were some, as in anything, there's a period of 6 months of startup, that how to weave the team together, how to have people recognize that uh, if they haven't done this before, that they can lean on some of us who have, that says, look, this period, we're exactly where we should be.
yeah,
3 months
yeah.
in, you're
As
thinking there's some
frustrating as it
problems.
feels,
three
where
months
we're
in, you're
at.
thinking
Yeah.
there's some problems, but it's like, that's the cut in the teeth type thing, to get everybody, comfortable with, where they're at, what they do, how they, who they can rely on, and how we have to rely on one another, to execute
Yeah.
projects like this. So,
It's amazing how life takes you on a journey and seems to it kind of pushes you down a path. Here you are, having had that experience in BP Amoco and now helping to build this monastery in Tibet with similar qualities. And as you're talking about this, building this cross-cultural collaborative teams, as you say, there's a ramp up and a period of expected frustration as you get these teams put together. But in order for you to go through that process again and again and again, there has to be an enjoyment level in it for you. So, what is it that you most enjoy? Because I think this is an instructor to leaders out there that actually the best leaders I've seen kind of fall in love with leadership and fall in love with developing others and fall in love with the actual process. They don't lose their intellect because as they rise up, they're doing less of the work and more.
yeah.
Just actually,
Yeah.
they're being paid to have conversations, as I say sometimes.
That
So
in this situation, that's exactly what this was. I have the ability to see what it's going to take. What's the size of the project? Okay, it's a $2 million capital construction project. It's not what's it going to take? Well, you need to get governmental approvals at a regional level and the district level.
right,
You got auditory issues. You got your funding issues. You got managing the expectations of the back table, which is the foundation itself that's trying to promote the construction of the project. You have putting together the team that has the capacity to come together and exercise the project, and you're doing it remotely. So I mean,
yeah,
it's like, well, I know what we need is we need a Nepali, construction or project manager that can take this forward, but also that we, have enough, the relationship and knowledge with, that we can deal with some of the problems that would typically be presented in a developing country in which there's known issues with regards to corruption and this type of thing. So I understand everything that goes into the picture. And as I saw the various pieces coming together, it was like, well, I need to support, the project manager who we've identified, and he can certainly grow and actually has the capacity to execute this. And he just needs my support and backing, and other people need to understand as this group comes together, it will demonstrate, where its deficiencies are, if there are any, and then it can identify how to, leverage its strengths. And that's exactly what we've done. And we've got, we've been
That's
at it
great.
now about a year and a bit, yeah, a year and a half. And we've gone through like the first phase, and with the success of this group, we've elected to continue, and we'll add another $1 million, addition to the front wing of the
That's great.
monastery. We'll take it up to total, probably on the order of a $3 million project that, has come together. And we've got the local contractor, but we also have local management team that's pulled together with the sponsoring entity there in Mustang Valley, and our limited but very effective project team that's come together around.
That's great. Well, it sounds to me as if, the recognition of the value of collaboration with the outcome of a project kind of gets married for you. So it's like, I know that we have to do this. I have this ability and I'm trained to see things in a certain way. And I understand that we need this kind of competency and this kind of competency. And it's going to come from different places. And I've had experience in putting teams like that together to get this result coming. And, so it all comes together for you in that way. Is that fair to say? Is that one way of looking at it?
Yeah, and I've plugged in and out of multiple projects. I wasn't just in one team, so I was up
Yes, of course.
4 or 5 teams at a time. Being the commercial advisor, or structuring the deal, or negotiating the contracts with the foreign governments. So I had, in that regard, I had the benefit of many, many team engagements, and saw, the issues of how teams come together.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, you get enough, you have enough opportunity to do that, you begin to realize who should be on the team. You can look around and, oh, these are the
These are
15
people.
men and women, and these are the countries that we would like to have represented in whatever kind of project you're looking at. It's like, you're going to need a little of this, you're going to need a little of the local perspective, you're going to need, and you want people who can come together and work in that kind of collaborative fashion.
Yeah, that's great.
It's that, at least that's been my observation. And now as I go, beyond just the activities of energy projects, and into more esoteric activity, even still, we're launching some aspects that look at broad perspectives of human evolution. And even there, it's the same type of thing, in trying to build a team
Principles apply, right?
who has expertise in these various areas. And given that these various areas can be viewed as somewhat siloed at times, who has in those various silos perspectives that they realize that they're integrated in all the others as well, so that they can work in the interdisciplinary kind of perspective. So
Right.
it's quite interesting, actually.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm going to get to that project in a second. I want to jump into more of the personal realm with you, which is an important transition that probably led you to actually be involved in that project. And that was your experience back in 2009 when you had your skiing accident that resulted in a major concussion. And can you touch on that experience and talk about, obviously that had major implications on how it changed your life and shifted your career trajectory and led you into the study of profound, deep meditation practices. So, if you could open up that story a little bit as a transition, then we can come back to that project a little bit and touch on that towards the end.
As I said, up to that point in time with my life, I'd been, I'd achieved some success in a large corporation in oil and gas. I'd been, a conditioned Midwest, engineer that then looked at broader perspectives of making decisions in the face of uncertainty from an economic perspective. I'd taken a year off and traveled around the world and had some perspective of, the culturalization and the the kind of iceberg perspective of what we know about how we view the world is very superficial. A lot of our conditioning is something that we're not even aware of. But having had success, I was working with a small independent when I was off on a ski trip, and we were close to. We actually were in an international dispute, but that's a total other story. But it was a challenging period of time. We were either going, make millions or lose millions. And so anyway,
Got it.
I was on the bubble, and I had this ski accident, and I don't remember anything. It was a severe concussion. I was out for a day.
Wow, that's intense.
Very few. I had isolated memories of that day, including one which was, an out of body kind of perspective. So,
yeah. And that led you, that process led you, I think, to rediscovering or discovering kind of meditative practices. Is that fair to say that there was how did that connection get made as you were in your healing process and adjustment to what had occurred? How did meditation show up as a support for you?
Yeah, for me, the like I say, I had a severe concussion, so it was probably somebody would describe it as moderate, to mild TBI, but I definitely had loss of some prefrontal cortex capacity. I had extremely high integrative math, kind of, like a human calculator. I could look at the gas deal and I could just assess
figure it out
most immediate, just with factors that you put together and you throw these things together and it kicks out over here. So a lot of the wiring of the brain was impacted. So that was like a noticeable impact. Humorously, sarcasm is something that can be manifest. The lack of ability to pick up sarcasm is something that happens with TBI, because you have to pull together 3 or 4. What is the person saying? What's their visual manifestation? What's their body language saying? And in the context of the conversation, are they being serious or are they joking?
Right, exactly.
A lot of the time, sarcasm would just go over my head, and it was like, and I found over time, it's like that's not a real loss. I just had to.
Yeah, that's not a tremendous.
It's like if people are just like, so what? It's like I didn't get it. But anyway, a combination of things actually. I think they talk about physician. Heal yourself. You find your own way to take care of what you need in life, and. I was, at the same time, I was riding motorcycles a lot for recreational activity. And also I found I enjoy sailing. I enjoy riding motorcycles. These are things that enable you to go into the state of flow. So, and lots of people experience this. They, maybe they're outdoors, they're naturalists, they're into music, they're whatever their activity is, that puts them totally into a situation or immerses their sensory processing, so they're not capable of thinking at the same time, or they don't have to. If you're right on the edge of the sailing and you're keeping the boat just totally lined out and you're right there,
you ain't thinking. You
ain't thinking. Same thing with regards to feel of motorcycle flow, riding down the road, and that type of thing. So these two forms of sailing and meditation were, in retrospect, my natural entry to meditation.
It makes sense.
On the other hand, the motorcycle riding had a big V-twin motorcycle, not a Harley, but a Yamaha. Anyway, I got out of position on it and I twisted my back and I had sciatica. I found the only way to get through the sciatica was to do some yoga stretches. And so, to resolve my yoga problem, or to resolve my sciatica problem, I got deep into the asana, the body practices of
Hatha yoga,
yoga.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but parallel to that, of course, I was exposed to
Right.
meditative and deeper relaxation, and then things started to develop, and I went off to a yoga center in the Bahamas to stabilize my physical practice, so I could make sure that the sciatica, was totally released, and I did do that, and I stabilized the practice, so I don't have that problem. But I then subsequently opened up more and more into different meditative experiences, uh, and yeah, that's what led me to meet my partner Chan, who's a psychologist who I met through a meditative group, and the advanced in Indian and Tibetan practices, actually enable the individual to almost rewire their mind. And
Yes.
that's we have our normal conditioning, we have the way our mind is normally operating. We have, maybe you've heard some of this neurological studies of, the default mode of thinking. The default mode is a self-referential thinking. We think about I got this
I,
problem, I need to think
right,
about
that's
that.
right.
What do I need to do next? All these I issues. Um, so
Yeah.
anyway, I I learned a lot about, my own, mental conditioning and my own what viewpoint of life,
Right.
and then began to look at exploring that a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So it's like the meditative practice allowed you to kind of be aware of that I conditioned self, and then also got you connected to a deeper resourcefulness of some way of processing and looking at things that was additive. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, if you,
However you want to describe that, like a
I
little,
don't want to
yeah,
get too woo woo,
right,
but
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it does.
yeah,
It is interesting that I will say, as I sat in I've sat in a meditation group early in my period, and I haven't been at this but for maybe 8 years. 2009, I had the ski accident, the TBI. I had sciatica, and I got into the yoga, and I slowly got into a simple meditative concentration. You know, concentration, examining the mind. You know, I'm different. There's all kinds of different meditative, uh, practices. And there's a lot of people who are focusing on the benefits of meditation. John Kabat-Zinn and the mindfulness, based, pain treatments and just, deep relaxation. But as I've gone further on some of this, examining the mind, I see that there's an interesting corollary between uh, uh, going beyond thought into uh, deeper contemplative states. And I think it's some of the theoretical physicists that did so much, in the early uh, 20th century. The Einsteins, the Schrodingers, the
poems.
Pauli's, these theoretical physicists, so somebody, I forget who it was attributed, said it's like, as soon as humans learn to be able to sit quietly for 2 hours, right, you know without thought, but just trying to address in some fashion a problem, uh, they'll be amazed at what develops. And so
Yeah,
a lot of the breakthroughs in these, very deep theoretical, and I have no capacity in that area, but these significant breakthroughs that people have in these extremely challenging problems, I think is almost some kind of, manifestation of wisdom coming back to them in some fashion. Uh,
yeah. Well, I think it's and sometimes I encourage to some degree of success and a lot of failure to get my clients to take on a meditative practice, simple meditative, nothing overly complicated. And many that do commit to it for at least 30 days start finding value simply in the relaxation they get. But what you're saying is, this is also the experience I've had with people that do it for a long period of time, they tend to start connecting to a deeper resources, a deeper sense of wisdom. They can't really explain. It's not coming from what they know, but it comes to them and it makes sense. And it actually, if they play it out, it actually works. So, that's the value of it. But, and I think what we all face is our conditioning says no. Our conditioning says you're fine. The identity of who we are is, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's what is sometimes the block. But if you were to give a good reason for an executive to try it for 30 days, what are one or two reasons you would suggest as good reasons?
Absolutely surprise yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be extended. In fact, if you start at 5 and 10 minutes, you begin to, and you practice and observe your mind, you'll see how rapid our mind is running around. You can't really constrain, so if you think, like, if anything, if you could train your mind to find some stillness, and in that stillness be able to have more clarity of analysis and thought. If you could sit and see how things trigger reactions in you, right? You can understand what is a triggered response and what is your own internal
conscious.
And oftentimes we have a lot of conditioning, and so we have, and everybody has these these things that something will happen and you'll get triggered, and then you blow off, you have response, and the response is really not a thoughtful response. The response is how that person triggered you relative to something that you had experienced previously, and now you're coming out with this reactivity. And so one thing one can do is, by having a meditative practice, even if it's sitting quietly 5 minutes a day, twice a day, in the morning and the evening, you can begin to at least see, develop a cognition or an understanding,
awareness
of the working of your mind. And once you begin to do that, then it becomes more interesting. It becomes like almost an intriguing project of how can you go deeper into some of these concentrated states of letting go of the thought and getting, and once you do that, you start beginning to have meditative experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
People talk about stillness, clarity, and bliss, and people will typically be oriented to one of the three of them, and the stillness probably brings wisdom.
Yes.
Is how I'd say it. And surprise yourself. Try it for 30 days and see if you don't feel
better.
Yeah.
Well, that's to me the first two things are they feel more relaxed, and they also start catching themselves before they. I had one client said, I started recognizing I get ramped up of my team, and then I'd be like frantically yelling at them, and then I started noticing that I was going to do that, and I was able to stop doing that because I knew it wasn't going to have a good outcome. And that's amazing right there. And so those are seem to be the first benefits of it. And then over time, I think, as you say, you get more. Would you say that you more find flow easier now that you've had it longer practices? Flow more accessible to you? Sense of flow?
I don't want to be, I used to need sailing. I used to need, the motorcycle. I used to love to go skiing, and I still do love all those three things. But I did them largely to get into that mode.
Flow, yeah.
And now it's like, not that I'm flowing 100% of the time.
Of course.
I'm getting, it's like this. I'm in flow. I'm in flow. I'm not. So it's and it doesn't. It can be, it can be just, going about daily activity and not getting caught up in the default mode. Once you can shut the default mode off, and
that's a huge gift. Huge gift.
Things start opening up.
Yeah. Well, with a little bit of time we have left, I wanted to check in on come back to talk to you a little bit about the collaborative evolution project. Maybe you could just share with me kind of what launched that, and what are some of the key elements that are emerging out of that that you see that you want to give that project wants to give to the world, if you will?
Yeah, it's an organic project that really, started with my own personal experience and interaction with some of my friends, sharing some of my experience on this personal growth path that involved some of the meditative experiences, and comparing that across some traditions. And I had some friends who are uh, 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 encouraging, other religious practices. And I said, as opposed to like, my practice and your practice, what about looking at what the common factors are, And so the, the, the practices that we do at a meditative level, kind of like there's gradations of them. So simple mindfulness practice or relaxation practice, is a meditative type practice. And then you shift beyond that and you go more into something that would be considered contemplative practices. And these contemplative practices also have different gradations of practice, and all the while you're going into deeper levels of meditative states, or people might even describe them as altered states of consciousness. So I've done a lot of with Christian mystics, though I came in through the Indo-Tibetan perspective. I see a lot of Christian mystic comparisons and overlaying, and I looked at some of this stuff, and so that was where I first came at this, saying it would be good. And even inside the Indo-Tibetan traditions, there's different lineages, and so there's kind of like pride and ownership of the different lineages. They certainly don't want to dilute their teaching by mixing it all up. And on the other hand, there's not as much of discussion of we do share a real common technology of
absolutely
shifting our mind and training our mind. And so looking at that, trying to say, what is the essence of really what's happening here? And of course, I've had some, I don't want to go into it, but I've had some personal meditative experiences that I cannot explain, just like I had an out-of-body experience during the day I had that concussion. I can't explain certain things. I can't explain with my materialistic Asian, upbringing and everything like that. These things that are happening are not something that I have an explanation for. So looking at some of that with regards to, what is actually happening in some of these deeper contemplative practices, and bringing down the barriers between and within the various religions, so that a broader perspective of humanity could access the benefit of these elevated states of consciousness. So that's where it really started, and then it is expanded to look at different aspects of what's taking place in our experiencing of reality. So that's where we've drawn a broader description of things that impact human evolution. And so we have personal development. So, your whole leadership development and coaching and enhancing the capacity of an individual, both, their internal development of skills and capacities and viewpoints. And so a personal development path that could eventually be spiritual or not. And certainly not, it's not mandatory for anyone to pursue the spiritual path, but it becomes I think, at the age of 50, having had the ski accident and that type of thing, it was just a logical point in my life to make that shift and that entry. Though I had been exposed to it earlier in my life, and the signal was there, but I didn't
follow it.
Wasn't right and that type of thing. And instead, I was really practicing some of this, by being engaged in nature and beauty, and I was experiencing my taste of what I describe as the divine just by experiencing life and being open to it.
Right, skiing or sailing also.
Yeah,
Like, all
it's
that
like it's
beauty.
putting me someplace, and so I had a very fortunate life, and I had very fortunate life, and I've had a few challenges as well, and I found the meditation to be beneficial for addressing some of those, and
Yeah,
and
and
we've, like I say, right now we're looking at things that have everything from how one philosophically looks at the world, right, um, to some of the essence traditions and the contemplative states that potentially shift one's awareness, or a contemplative state, or elevated states of consciousness, and these mystical practices that people talk about at that level, contemplative side of traditions. They often also sort of described gifts of
yeah,
non-ordinary capacity. So
yes.
I will warn people: you do not want to pursue gifts. Gifts are something that would come to you if
You would naturally, yeah,
you're
versus
fortunate
pursuing them.
enough to get it, but
Yeah, don't go
don't
after
go
them.
looking for it.
Don't
Don't
make
go.
it a goal. Yeah, don't make it a goal. That can be dangerous. Well, and what is your, if you were to say your greatest hope out of this project that you were really hoping will be the gift from it? If you were to say that, what would you say that would be? What you're hoping
Uh,
that?
I would like to think that by and it will require collaboration, just like
Yes, of
I'm
course.
talking about. This is like you have to come together. It's a very difficult thing to get to people to break down their silo and cross from their culturalization and be open to the exploring the culturalization of the other, particularly with some of these very deep fundamental questions. But I think a better understanding of what has been the trajectory of human evolution,
And
from
what's potential? Yeah.
its initiation through to where we stand today. The challenges we face, quite honestly, with the meeting between North Korea and Russia and China, we're at one of the more difficult times in a geopolitical perspective, and
For
uh,
sure, that's for sure.
the risk associated that we face, from man on man and man on nature, it's like it's pretty profound, and yet we're also doing this at a time where it seems like there is a significant um, shift in collective consciousness. There are lots more people seem to be opening up in some fashion,
Opening up to this. Yeah.
rapidly, and yet it's not how well articulated it is, how well described it is, to provide some more not structure, but to provide a framework where more people can access and openly discuss and engage in some of these discussions. And parallel to that, we have, like I say, we have a lot of challenges facing humanity, clearly, and yet, with a blossoming perspective of collaborative, participation in solving problems, and collaborative leadership, in addressing and framing up some of the efforts that go to addressing both, problems at the very local level as well as problems at a global level. Uh, you know, I don't know. Every little bit helps, I'm sure, and
Well, yeah.
there's a lot
Yeah.
that can be done, but it needs to be done both at the personal level as well as at some kind of organization, or some kind of a global, a more, well, not a global, but it has to start in a relationship, right?
That's
So
exactly right. And those relationships are breaking down. And go back to Albert Einstein's, I think it was Albert Einstein's quote, you can't solve the problem in the same consciousness that created it. And right now we're doing the opposite, trying to solve the problem, and we're separating and not collaborating. We're going into camps, and
mhm.
we all share a common experience. You look at the bonobo apes, for example, they get along really well. They've created a culture which is very loving and caring and connecting, and they're just a shred away from us in our DNA. So we know that we have the ability to do it. We've gotten away from it. So I think looking at your gifts on bringing collaborative teams together, and you have, I know we won't be able to have to go into all the names, but you have scientists and people from different spiritual traditions and coming together to look at the commonality to help raise consciousness of the species in support of that, so that we have better resolutions to some of these challenging, seemingly intractable problems we're facing right now.
Yeah, that's in a nutshell. That's it's like you think of how do you look at the world? You start from a philosophical view. What are your belief systems?
Yes, exactly.
Any belief systems, you're going to have. We don't realize somebody would say, I don't have any beliefs. I just facts. I'm a data person. It's like, well, all that data then becomes the belief. So anyway, exactly. You have the philosophy, you have the belief structures, and then you have your own personal development and how you interact in a group, and the identification of problems and the means by which one could possibly contribute to solutions of them, and then it's think globally, act locally. It's like you can't take
it's a good phrase
on the world's problems, but you can address those that you can at a local level, and you can contribute if you can in some more collaborative effort if called upon and if so moved. So that's making more of this available in a fashion that can be easily processed,
digested, and used.
And digested, and a starting place, of course, is personal development, awareness, understanding one's own culturalization to then be able to understand, others' culturalization, and seeing the gifts of leveraging across those differences in a team environment, and then bringing forward the collaborative effort in which there's, I'm sure in your leadership studies you've looked at the wisdom of the team versus the wisdom of an individual.
Absolutely. And that collaboration, all of that is so adds so much more value. It's bringing people together should be a multiplication, not addition, right? And certainly not a subtraction. Let's not hope for that. So, well, I appreciate you coming on today, Keith. You really shared a lot about your pathway and your journey and the challenges and how you've kind of turned the lemons into lemonade and now are really trying to contribute through this project, which is wonderful. Any final words you want to say as far as to wrapping up for yourself for today?
If you're not having fun, something's wrong.
There you go. I think that is important. We need to inject.
It's supposed to be a joy.
Life is supposed to be a joy, right? It's supposed to be enjoyment, not drudgery. That's well said.
Keep looking for the way to find your happiness. You have challenges, obviously, everybody does, and we face challenges. To face challenges as a group, it's much more profound than that.
And effective. Right? Yeah. Fun and effective. Well, very good. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I know that these are the kinds of shows and the kinds of people that I want to be talking to on a regular basis to hopefully inform you and open your mind to new possibilities. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen in today. And we look forward to seeing you back on our next edition of Unfazed, Under Fire. I'm David Craig Utz. Have a great rest of your day.